Chapter 17. Alice. After the showdown in the theater, James kept his distance. On Monday, everyone was excited for the next event. James arrived around 3 in the afternoon to set up an arts and crafts project. He had colorful sheets of paper, stencils, stickers, and calligraphy pens all set up so that people could make handmade Christmas cards. People were supposed to address the envelopes and hand them in so that they would arrive on time. James had a special connection at the post office who promised him delivery by Christmas Eve, everywhere in the continental United States. I was impressed, considering there was only a week left. I made a card for my mother and one for my father. After that, James instructed us to make a few additional cards that he would deliver to a nearby nursing home. I wasn't sure what to say to someone I'd never met, but I covered a few Santa stickers with positive messages about the season. "May peace and joy be yours in this season of giving," I wrote. It sounded like something a store-bought card might say. I reached for a handful of envelopes and addressed the ones to my parents. James had 2 boxes set up at the front of the office, one for the nursing home and one to be mailed. I dropped the finished products in their respective slots and turned to go back upstairs. He was busy helping someone with their missive. There was a problem with the glue, and he was searching his supplies for another tube. I watched him from across the room, feeling a mixture of regret and comfort. It was nice knowing that he was around. I cared about him deeply, and I had been really worried for a long time. At least I knew that he landed on his feet and that he would be okay. It would have been nice if things could have worked out between us, but at least we both were functioning adults. We could go on the way we had, focusing on our careers. It wasn't a bad life, and I was grateful for so many things I had. I was just lonely sometimes, but that didn't mean I wanted to risk having my heart broken again. Once was enough. Thank you very much. That night, I watched another Christmas romance. I must have been going numb to the stories because this one didn't faze me the way the previous ones had. Sure, the wholesome, good-natured woman and the hot but confused hero were obviously meant to be together. Yes, there were some bumps in the road that corresponded with traditional holiday themes. But in the end, when they settled down for Christmas dinner as a happily united couple, I didn't cry. I just took another sip of wine and changed the channel. Tuesday, James wasn't in the office, and he didn't call me. Wednesday, he was there to set up a milk and cookie bar with a hot chocolate feature. It wasn't an activity so much as a treat for people to take back to their desks. The season wasn't heating up anymore. It was on fire. I needed 110% from everyone in the office, and there wasn't a lot of time for games. James and I talked about wrapping up the month with fewer activities. He insisted on having something the last few days, but agreed that they would be quicker to allow people to remain productive. The cookie and cocoa bar was the perfect solution. I don't know where he got the cookies, but they were perfectly sized, not too big and not too small. When I bit into one, it was moist and chewy, sweet but not overpowering. I grabbed 2 more before making my way to the cocoa station. James was there, helping people sort out all the goodies. I stood patiently while he poured a mug from a shining urn and turned it over to one of my staff. When it was my turn, he favored me with a smile. I responded in kind, pleased that we could at least be civil. A memory hit me of his hands on my thighs, but I shrugged it off. Accepting the drink from him, our fingers touched. There was a spark, but he didn't follow up, and neither did I. Walking with me down the length of the table, he selected a peppermint stick and dunked it into my mug. I added whipped cream, just to be indulgent. This friendly back and forth was almost too much. I wished perversely that he would hate me, that he would stiffen when I walked by and have to force me to play nice. It would have made my decision easier to stick to. But he was being kind and solicitous, even though I was giving him the cold shoulder. It made me second-guess myself, wondering if we could have a future. I set my jaw and marched out of the conference room. Upstairs in my office, suddenly the cookies didn't look so good. I had a pit in my stomach that left me reluctant to eat. Sipping the hot chocolate, I called up the latest spreadsheet I had been working on. Just 1 floor below, James continued offering holiday cheer to my staff, and try as I might, I couldn't get him out of my head. James. When Alice and I were planning the sequence of events, I promised that the last week and a half would be more low-key. But that didn't mean there would be no parties. Taking cocoa and cookies back to their desk was fine for one day, but I wasn't getting paid just to cater. On Tuesday, I planned a beach-themed soiree. Instead of Christmas in July, it would be July and Christmas. My crew and I came in early to set up, but we let people work in the ambience until 3. We covered an entire wall with a beach scene rolled out on plastic cling. It set the stage for the rest of the office, where we staged conch shells and beach umbrellas. Throwing in a few lounge chairs, we served lemonade and hot dogs for lunch. When the hour approached, we created a modeling sand pit in the conference room, securing it in a wooden frame with plastic on all 4 sides. I turned on some calypso music, and we had a white noise machine that produced wave sounds. As soon as Alice gave the go-ahead, everyone popped up and started dancing. I distributed leis and sunglasses, and the office was officially rocking. Alice came downstairs to join us, and I couldn't help but sneak glances at her from time to time. She seemed relaxed, more than she had earlier in the month. These parties were good for her as well as for her team. She got to spend time with them in a stress-free environment, getting to know them as people rather than just employees. I just wish she would share some of that newly discovered comfort with me. I was trying to convince myself that she was right. The time was past for us to reconnect. It wasn't right anymore, and I needed to let go. But damn it, she was right there, and it was so hard not to go to her and sweep her into my arms. I wanted to show her that we still had a chance, but she made it clear that she didn't want to hear it. I tried to be kind at every turn. Smiling easily was the one surefire way to get her to let her guard down. But I had to be casual about it. There would be no more arranging to sit next to her or dunking peppermint sticks in her hot cocoa. It seemed like our future was slipping out of my grasp, and there was nothing I could do about it. I turned my gaze away. Watching her dance with someone else was too painful. Even though I knew there was nothing sexual going on between her and any of her coworkers, it still hurt to see her enjoying herself with them. But if I were to step up in their place, I knew she would turn tail and run. I still had a job to do, and it involved making sure other people were having a good time. I decided to give Alice a taste of her own medicine and asked Debbie from HR if she wanted to dance. "I'd love to," Debbie said in her thick Southern accent. We spun around the cubicles, mixing it up and delighting everyone who watched. Debbie was a great dance partner, and I found myself laughing spontaneously. We took a break to get something to drink, and I searched for Alice in the crowd. She stood beside the stairs, talking to Charlie from the shop. It didn't appear that she was jealous or that she had even noticed. After dancing with Debbie, I took Marcy for a spin. She didn't last quite as long, leaving me searching for another partner. One after another, I shook a tail feather with nearly every woman on staff, and a few of the men. Todd from the graphics team had taken some dance lessons in his youth. He showed me a thing or two, pretending that I was the female partner and he was the man. Everyone laughed and clapped as we danced cheek to cheek, hamming it up. I released Todd and went to check on the sandcastle sculptors, waving to all my admirers. Alice was finally watching, clutching her lemonade with a death grip. I couldn't help but wink at her, letting her know that she was number 1 in my mind. Her frown turned upside down into a smile as I passed, warming my heart. Maybe there was hope after all. I got down on my knees in the conference room to examine 2 sand structures, built by members of the sales department. They showed a distinct lack of architectural design. The first one was a misshapen lump with a paper umbrella rising from the top. It featured a moat and what might have been a drawbridge, but no doors or windows for people to see out of. I clapped the artist on the back anyway and pronounced it astonishingly lifelike. They knew I was full of it and laughed appreciatively anyway. The second sandcastle was a little more sophisticated. It had turrets and a front entrance with slits for arrows scored across the surface. "Totally unrealistic," I proclaimed. "It's better than theirs." The sales team pointed at the monstrosity sharing the sand pit. "I don't think so," I argued. "They have the umbrella on top, so that's clearly a win." "No one said it was a competition," the sales team complained. "I'm just kidding," I allowed, seeing that they were getting upset. "You did a great job," and gave all of the builders gift certificates to the mall for some last-minute Christmas shopping. They were psyched, returning to their task with renewed vigor. I got to my feet, brushing off my pants. Checking the refreshment tables, I rearranged some of the snacks. It was approaching 5, and people were going to want to go home. yet no one made a move to collect their things. The event lasted until 5:30, when most of the participants realized they had to move on to the next part of their day. Parents had kids to pick up and dinners to cook. The singles had dogs to walk and friends to meet. I didn't see Alice, and I was fairly confident she was upstairs in her office. I wanted to go to her, but that didn't seem like a good idea. She would turn me away, and the encounter would cement our status as rivals. Instead, I focused on cleaning the office and resetting it for the next day. In just a few hours, we erased all traces of July and Christmas. The tables and the lounge chairs, the sand pit, and the wall mural were all returned to the obscurity of our truck. I vacuumed the entire floor, scooping up every last grain of sand that had spilled and crumb that dropped. By the time I was done, it was almost 8 o'clock. I wondered if I should stay and walk Alice to her car. She made it clear that she didn't want my help, but what kind of man would I be if I left her alone in the office at night? After debating for 5 long minutes, I decided to bite the bullet. Hoofing it upstairs, I knocked on her door. "Come in," she called. I opened the door, but didn't step inside. "We're leaving. Can I walk you to your car?" "No, thanks," she said. "I'll be fine." "It's late," I reminded her. "I'd feel a lot better if you would call it quits for the night." She put her pen down, giving me her full attention. There wasn't anything romantic in the air, nothing possessive or even friendly about my offer. It was a rock-bottom admission that I wanted her to be safe. She nodded finally, typing a few last words before closing her laptop. Grabbing her purse, she joined me out in the hall. "That was a great party today." "Thanks," I said. I didn't want to have a prolonged conversation. Every moment with her was a reminder of what could never happen. I wanted to pretend that I was cool with her putting space between us, but I wasn't. Walking her across the parking lot, I didn't even bother to make small talk. She gazed at me curiously after opening her car door. I met her eyes, but didn't hold them. If I wasn't allowed to kiss her or express my feelings for her in any way, there wasn't much reason to share a quiet moment. I gave her a tight smile before retreating to find my own car. If I saw disappointment in her face as I walked away, it was no cause for celebration. We were hurting each other, and I had no idea why. Alice. Thursday's activity was a surprise for me. I wasn't even sure if it was a good surprise. James had mentioned that there were a few things he was holding back, so that I could join in the fun. I wished he hadn't kept this one secret, though, since it took every ounce of patience I had not to call the whole thing off from the beginning. It was ice sculpting, and it sounded dangerous. James showed up at noon to guide us through the activity. There were no decorations in the office, and everyone was wondering what the next event would be. I walked downstairs just as confused as everyone else. Then James burst through the staff door and called us all outside. We followed him eagerly, not sure what to expect. We all knew it would be good, though. If there was one thing that James had proven, it was that he knew how to have fun. There were 24 blocks of ice standing on pedestals in the courtyard. Each block was nearly a perfect rectangle, almost as tall as I was. My eyes flashed wide open as James circled one monolith. "We're going to be ice sculpting today," he announced, to the delight of the crowd. People clapped and began whispering to each other, excited to see how it was going to play out. I narrowed my eyes dubiously. How were we going to carve ice without picks and chainsaws? Was it really smart to give everyone a sharp implement and have them hack at a frozen slab? What would my insurance company have to say about this if I was forced to pay workman's comp? "This is Paul, ice sculptor to the stars," James revealed, a tattooed man in a white apron who was putting the finishing touches on a mermaid. I couldn't believe I didn't see it before, but the sculpture was amazing. She was almost lifelike, standing on her tail with long locks and a bikini top. Paul chiseled a few more details into the eyes before turning to face us all. "Good afternoon," he said cheerfully. "I don't know about stars, but I've done plenty of weddings and graduations. Ice sculpting is a fun hobby, and with a little experience, you can create really impressive structures for your next backyard barbecue." I looked at James, but he was arranging tools for all the participants, his back turned. I wondered if I had been too hard on him. The night before, when he'd walked me to my car, I could feel the disappointment radiating from his shoulders. He had only ever been friendly to me, and I'd chased him away like a cruel mistress. I didn't want to feel bad for what I was doing. I was only trying to protect myself. We couldn't ever try again or think that things might work out differently than they had in the past. There was only one way any relationship with James would end, and that would be heartache. He would be oh so wonderful for a few months, maybe even a few years. But eventually, reality would catch up and he would leave me just like he did before. It might have been tough at that moment, but I was looking out for my own best interests. I couldn't trust him. He had proven that not once, but twice. His plan to fly away as soon as Christmas was over cemented that reality. I just had to remain firm, to continue holding him at arm's length until after the holiday season. Then he could bill me for his time, and I would never have to see him again. The thought of losing him stabbed me right in the chest, and I winced, reaching for my heart. "Are you okay?" Debbie asked. I forced myself to breathe, finally understanding the path I had chosen. It was for the best, but it was going to be incredibly painful. I had to soldier through, forcing myself to continue even though 90% of my mind and 100% of my soul wanted to run to him. "I'm fine," I recovered shakily. Paul was giving a demonstration, explaining the different techniques that could be used. He wasn't attempting to carve with a chainsaw, which was wonderful. Instead, there were chisels and hammers at each station. "Place the chisel against the ice like this," Paul showed us. "You can tap it lightly with the hammer to break off little pieces, or give it a good solid whack to cut deeper." I tuned in to get the gist of the activity before the party broke up into individual projects. Each person got a block of ice to work on. Both James and Paul circled the gathering. James made helpful comments and jokes about how each sculpture was turning out. Paul guided the participants with more concrete tips as far as which angle to drive the chisel in and how fast to move. I knew I couldn't sculpt a mermaid, so I decided to try to make a snowman. That seemed like a simple task, but I learned that 3 spheres stacked on top of each other were anything but easy. A few times I chipped off more than I wanted to and ended up with a Frosty with bites taken out of him. We worked for an hour before Paul and James called it quits. "Put your hammers down," James called, as if we were all contestants on a game show. We all did as we were told, spending the next half hour wandering around the tiny forest of amateur sculptures as if it were a fine art museum. James took photos of everyone with their own design, promising to email them out later that day. "It looks nice," he said of mine when it was my turn to have my picture taken. "Can you tell what it is?" I asked suspiciously. "It's a snowman," he replied, snapping the photo. "That's right." I beamed, proud of my accomplishment. The taste of success was fleeting because James moved on to the next person without offering me anything more. I felt that familiar ache in my chest, wishing that we could be together. I was the only one standing in the way. Unless he changed his mind in the intervening week, he made it clear that he was interested in a fresh start. All I had to do was say yes, and we could be together. But I still didn't feel like I could trust him. As much as I wanted him, I needed to protect myself. I looked around for someone else to talk to and latched on to Craig from sales. He had created a distinctly phallic-looking object that everyone was trying not to laugh at. "What is it?" I asked, marveling at the elongated stalk and the smooth crown that might neatly fit the bill. "It's a Christmas tree," he replied, studying me to determine whether or not I was angry. "It doesn't look like a Christmas tree," I said. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." A few of the employees snapped pictures of the ice stick before retiring back to the office. We all had a good laugh, but then it was back to work. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to James or tell him how much I had enjoyed this activity. He'd proven me wrong, conducting a safe demonstration and allowing my staff to flex their creative muscle. But he was busy cleaning, and I didn't want to bother him. I walked back inside with the rest of them, resigning myself to another 4 or 5 hours of work. This time there would be no James to walk me to my car. He would be long gone by 8 o'clock, and I would be alone.